First story. The road in Montana wound serpentine after serpentine road, as if the mountain itself refused to let go of those who dared to climb so high. The air was clear, almost crystalline, and with each turn the car seemed to plunge deeper into silence. The snow lay in an even layer on the branches of the spruce trees, and with each movement of the branches, small white flakes fell onto the glass, as if someone from above was checking to see if you were still alive down there. Simon was silent. Allison was checking the map on her phone, but the signal had died about 20 minutes ago. "Looks like we're heading the right way," she said. "Just a couple of miles left. If this is even a road," he muttered. "I feel like we entered a different time." She chuckled. "You were just tired." "No," he looked at her. "It's just too quiet here, even for the mountains." A few minutes later, they noticed an old sign by the side of the road. The metal letters were faded, but they could still make out the words, "Ridgeview Lodge, Est, 1893. Below it hung a small plaque with faded inscriptions. "Don't to whistle until they pass the turn." Allison leaned closer to the glass. "Strange warning. Local superstition," Simon replied. But for some reason he also stopped talking. As they passed the sign, the wind hit the car, and a short whistle came from the depths of the ravine, as if someone wanted to check whether they were breaking the rule. Simon instinctively slammed on the brakes and glanced in the mirrors. There was no one behind them, only their tracks in the fresh snow. "Go ahead," Allison said quietly. I'm cold." He turned on the heating, gripped the steering wheel, and didn't look back. The hotel stood on the edge of a cliff, a massive building of dark stone, with arched windows and a sign whose letters were illuminated by a faint, almost sickly light. A man in an old-fashioned doorman's uniform stood at the entrance. He didn't move until they came closer, then simply nodded and opened the door. The interior smelled of polished wood, fireplace, and something old, as if time had truly stood still. Black and white photographs hung on the walls, people in period clothing, guests looking straight into the camera. Allison ran her hand along the wooden reception desk. "It's beautiful here, in its own way." "In its own way?" Simon repeated, noticing a woman emerging from around the corner. She was short, with gray hair pulled back into a bun. Her voice was soft but expressionless. "Welcome to Ridgeview Lodge. Did you register in advance?" "Yes, the name is Allison," the woman interrupted. "Room 307, third floor." Simon winced. "Wait, where are you from?" "But you booked under that name," she replied calmly and smiled. Allison nodded as if nothing strange had happened, but Simon noticed her left eyebrow twitch. The woman handed over a key. Not a card, but a real key, heavy, brass, with engraved numbers. "Take the stairs, the elevator isn't working yet. And if you hear someone calling your name, don't answer. Sound can sometimes play tricks here." Allison gave a short, strained laugh. When they reached the third floor, the hallway greeted them with silence and an old carpet that muffled their footsteps. Landscape paintings hung on the walls, all identical, snow-capped peaks and a small house below. Only in one of them did Allison notice something strange. She seemed to be able to see the silhouette of a woman in the window of the house. "Nice," she said, but quickly turned away. Simon was silent. He felt a slight pressure in his ears, as if the air were thicker here. The room was spacious but cold. The fireplace was built of rough stone, and a bed with a carved headboard stood in the corner. The window looked directly onto the abyss. "Well, there you go," Allison said, dropping the suitcase. "We even have a view." "Deaf to death," Simon muttered. "What?" "Nothing," he said, walking to the window. "It's just weird." Outside, the wind hummed, as if someone was talking quietly. Allison came up behind him, put her arm around his waist, and whispered, "You need to rest." He smiled but didn't turn around. "Are you sure this is where we were supposed to go? I thought you liked the mountains." "I like them. It's just that this hotel is kind of wrong." She turned to him, frowning. "Simon, you've been looking for too much weirdness lately." He was about to answer, but noticed her reflection in the mirror opposite. Allison was standing next to him, but her reflection was slightly delayed. Just a split second. He blinked. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, I just imagined it." A few minutes later, she lay down on the bed and fell asleep almost instantly. Simon sat by the fireplace, listening to the crackling of the logs. The wind made the window sashes shake. For a moment, he thought he heard someone walking down the hallway outside the door. Slow, confident steps. He approached and listened. Silence. When he returned to the chair, Allison quietly said something in her sleep. Her voice was hoarse, as if it wasn't hers. He shouldn't come here. Simon froze. What? She rolled over onto her side, still asleep. Allison, he whispered. She opened her eyes and looked at him, puzzled. What? You just said I was sleeping. Simon. He didn't. He answered. He just glanced at the window. A fog was already rising outside, as if the hotel was hiding from the world. He didn't, he answered, only glanced at the window. The fog was already rising outside. Soft, dense, as if alive, it settled on the windowsill and slowly crept upward, obscuring the silhouette of the mountains. Simon peered into the whitish haze and suddenly realized he couldn't hear a sound. No wind, no birds, no rustling of the pines. Nothing. Even the sound of their old car in the parking lot vanished, as if it had never existed. Strange, he said quietly. What? Allison responded. Hear that? What exactly? Exactly. She listened. The room felt hermetically sealed, as if cut off from the outside world. Even the old clock in the corner ticked with an unnaturally muffled sound, as if it were under a glass bell jar. Allison hugged herself, though the room wasn't too cold. Probably just tired, she said. Simon nodded, but his gaze was still fixed on the window. The fog was thickening, obscuring the glass, and it seemed as if someone was standing behind it. A vague silhouette, indistinct but very noticeable. They went down to the restaurant for dinner. Downstairs, there were only two other couples and the same manager, a man of about 50 with an impeccably shaven face and a vacant expression. He seemed oblivious to them, though he spoke evenly, politely, mechanically. There aren't many guests today, Allison remarked, pouring wine. Maybe it's not the season. In the mountains, early November? She smiled. Perfect time for such trips. Simon didn't answer. He felt the lamplight was too dim, and the shadows on the walls were moving a little too quickly. Every time he looked up, the shadows froze, returning to their normal form. Are you listening to me? Allison asked. Yes. Sure. She fell silent. For a moment, she simply looked at him. Then she leaned over and whispered, Did you get up last night? No. Are you sure? Absolutely. Allison nodded silently, took a sip of wine, and looked into the corner. Then, she said quietly, Who was standing by the bed? Simon looked up. What? I woke up in the middle of the night. You were sleeping next to me, and someone was standing at the foot of the bed. Just standing there. Maybe I imagined it. I saw him. Simon. He was in a dark suit. No face. Just a silhouette. He slowly put down his glass, trying to speak calmly. Why didn't you tell me before? I thought it was a dream, but then I noticed. She leaned a little closer. Footprints by the window. Wet, as if someone had been standing barefoot. That night, Simon couldn't fall asleep for a long time. Allison slept restlessly, occasionally twitching, as if she were hearing something in her sleep. He got up and went to the window. The fog hadn't cleared. On the contrary, it had grown thicker, now touching the glass, as if trying to penetrate. In the window, his reflection, he saw himself and Allison behind him on the bed. But in the reflection, she was lying facing him, although in reality, she was sleeping, turned toward the wall. He blinked. The reflection had returned to normal. Simon took a deep breath and ran a hand over his face. Nerves, he thought. It was all just fatigue. Too many hours on the road. He returned to bed and tried to close his eyes. But then he heard someone knock softly on the door. Once, then twice. He stood up. Who is there? Silence. Only the roar of blood in his ears. He opened the door. No one was there. Only an empty hallway, dim lamplight, the smell of old carpet. A lamp was burning at the far end of the hallway, and for a second he thought he saw someone standing beneath it, watching. But he blinked. No one was there. He closed the door, turned toward the bed, and froze. Allison sat, looking straight at him. Who came? She asked quietly. Nobody. I imagined it. No, I didn't. I saw a shadow under the door. In the morning, they went down to breakfast. The same administrator was sitting at the table, as if he hadn't left since the evening before. He smiled when they entered, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "How did you sleep?" "Great," Simon said. Allison remained silent. When they stepped out onto the veranda, the fog had almost cleared, but the air was strangely thick, sticky. The trees were motionless. The grass felt like plastic. Simon noticed a dent in the railing, as if fingers had dug in there, leaving a mark. "Do you see it?" he asked. "What?" He wanted to show her, but the marks were gone. Later, as he passed the reception desk, he heard it talking to someone on the phone. "Yes, they checked in yesterday." "Yes, a couple. Room 30. Pause. "No, sir, I don't think they figured it out yet." Simon froze. "What didn't you understand?" he asked. The administrator slowly looked up, still wearing that same obligatory smile. "Excuse me." That evening, Allison sat in front of the mirror, brushing her hair. Simon came over and put his arm around her shoulders. "I'll leave tomorrow." "Okay." "Why?" "I want to go home." She nodded, but her gaze remained in the reflection. "You know," she said suddenly, "sometimes I feel like it's not me looking out of the mirror." "What do you mean?" "Well, that it is someone else." He wanted to laugh, but couldn't. "You were just in an impressionable mood," he said. Allison put down her brush and turned to face him. "Then why did I just blink in the mirror and you didn't?" He glanced sharply into the mirror. Their reflection stood motionless, completely motionless. Then Allison's reflection slowly turned her head and smiled, a little wider than her real lips allowed. Simon instinctively recoiled. When he looked again, the reflection was normal. "We leave tomorrow morning," he said. She didn't answer. She just glanced at the window. The fog was returning. The Montana night seemed to dissolve the boundaries between reality and something else. The fog rose higher, thickly enveloping the old hotel, and the world outside the windows vanished. Simon stood by the glass, peering into the thick white haze, when he heard a soft rustling sound behind him, like someone running a finger along the wooden headboard. He turned around. Allison was asleep, or at least she should have been. He moved closer, listening. Her breathing became ragged, her lips moving as if she were muttering something. At first, it was incoherent sounds, but then he made out words. "Simon, open the door." "What?" he whispered. "Open the door." But waiting. He recoiled. The voice wasn't hers, lower, as if coming not from her throat, but from the depths of the room. Allison lay motionless, her eyes closed. Simon switched on the lamp. The light flickered dimly, and at that moment the television in the corner clicked softly and lit up on its own. The screen showed snow, white noise, thin stripes, distorted shadows. No signal, but amid the chaos, a face flashed. He didn't have time to make out it, but it was too close to the camera, as if someone was looking straight into their room. Simon rushed to the TV and pulled the plug. The noise didn't stop. The white stripes continued to dance. He pulled the cable out of the wall, and only then did the screen go dark. "Allison, wake up." His voice trembled. His wife slowly opened her eyes. She stared through him for a few seconds, then focused and quietly asked, "Why are you so pale?" He didn't tell anyone. He said everything was fine, that maybe there was a short circuit. But his hands were shaking. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the floor, and suddenly noticed a wet footprint on the carpet. From the door to the bed, small, bare footprints. He looked up sharply. The door was closed. The lock was intact. "Allison, did you get up during the night?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I didn't sleep well. I dreamed that someone was knocking on the window." He walked up to the window. The glass was fogged up. On the inside, and on it, a handprint. Clear, wet, as if someone had stood there and breathed. He wiped the imprint with his sleeve, trying not to show his fear. "We retired," he said. "It's just fatigue." They lay down, but sleep didn't come. The clock on the bedside table stopped at exactly 3:07. Simon noticed, but didn't say anything. That night, he was awakened by a strange sound, quiet, metallic. At first, it sounded like dripping water, but then he realized it was the radio on the table that had turned on by itself. There was a hissing sound, short clicks, then a female voice, distorted by static. "Stay." He ran over and turned it off, but the voice lingered for another 3 seconds, unrelated. When he turned back to the bed, Allison was sitting staring at the wall. "Did you hear that?" he asked. She nodded silently. "Simon," she said quietly, "I can remember how we got here." He froze. "What do you mean?" "I remember the road, the fog, but the hotel, this room." She ran her hand over the bedspread, as if feeling it for the first time. "I don't remember how we entered." He sat down next to her, trying to find the words, but he couldn't find the time. A light knock came from under the bed. 2 knocks, then another. He knelt down and peered in. There was nothing there, just a black crack and old floorboards, but the smell of damp grew stronger. Suddenly, Allison said sharply, "Don't open the door." He looked up. She was asleep again. Simon moved to the wall, pressing his palms to his temples. His breathing was ragged. The mirror opposite the bed reflected only him, but as soon as he turned away, he heard a rustling sound behind him. He glanced up sharply. The reflection had changed. Someone was standing next to his wife. The next morning, the hotel looked as if nothing had happened. The fog had cleared. The sun was breaking through the clouds. The air was crisp, almost pleasant. But it all felt unreal, as if nature itself was pretending. Simon packed quickly, almost silently. Allison sat on the bed, staring into space. There was no fear on her face, only a strange calm, as if everything that had happened that night hadn't to happen to them. "Hurry, please," he said, checking the bag. We leaving now?" She nodded without moving. He came closer and touched her shoulder. "Allison." She turned to face him. Her gaze was empty, slightly glassy. "I told you," she said quietly. "What?" "They don't want us to leave." He jerked his hand away. "Stop it. Just pull yourself together." She stood up, obediently walked to the mirror and fixed her hair. "Okay," she said evenly. "If that is how you want it." A few minutes later, they were already descending the stairs. The woman from reception was back. Same smile, same dress, but her gaze was more attentive now. "Leaving already?" she asked. Simon nodded. "Yes, the things are in the car." She looked down at the registration log. "That is odd," she said after a short pause. "I don't see your entry. Are you sure you stayed with us?" He felt a chill in his chest. "We arrived 2 days ago. 3rd floor, room 307, 3rd floor?" She asked again. "No one has lived there for several years." Allison was silent. Simon took a step back, as if suddenly jolted, and almost dragged his wife toward the door. He didn't turn around or answer. They stepped outside, the wind buffeting his face, and it seemed to him as if the hotel behind him was taller than it had been the night before. He unlocked the car, helped Allison in, and got behind the wheel. We're going," he said firmly. "Right now." She didn't answer. She sat, looking out the window. The road down led in a serpentine fashion, through the pines. The wheels crunched on the gravel. Simon felt his arms tense, as if the car itself were resisting movement. He glanced in the rearview mirror, and his heart sank. Someone was sitting in the backseat, a shadowy figure, like the reflection of someone leaning forward. The eyes weren't visible, but the silhouette was clear. He blinked. Nothing. He took a deep breath. Just stress, he thought. Just fog and a sleepless night. But the air in the car grew colder. He felt as if someone was breathing down his neck. He turned around. Allison was still looking out the window, but out of the corner of his eye, he saw the corner of her mouth twitch. Unnatural. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Of course," she replied. We almost home." "Home?" He glanced at her. But she turned her head slowly, and her smile widened. We're already here, Simon." He blinked, and realized the road ahead of them had changed. Instead of a mountain, a serpentine road, a narrow driveway surrounded by black trees. Headlights reflected in the windows of houses. He slowed down. "What is this?" Allison stared straight ahead. "You wanted to leave," she said. "But not everything can be left behind." The engine stalled. The headlights went out. Simon exhaled and turned the ignition key, but nothing happened. From the darkness outside, a footstep was heard. 1, 2. Someone was walking around the car. He turned his head and saw his reflection in the glass. Only the reflection was smiling. He heard breathing behind him. He turned around. "Allison," he whispered. She replied quietly, "I told you, they just wanted you to stay." Second story. When the Madison family set out for their annual fall picnic, they had no plans to stop by a lake. It wasn't even on the map, but the GPS suddenly malfunctioned, pulled them off the road. And behind the trees, a perfectly round body of water appeared, smooth, mirror-like, with no traces of people anywhere around. The dog, an old ginger retriever named Brick, was the first to sense something was wrong. His fur stood up along his back. He slowly approached the water's edge, and then stepped away, letting out a low growl. The parents decided the dog was simply tired after the long drive. 2 hours later, they would curse the moment they ignored his warning. Because that night, while the children slept inside the trailer, the water would start to move, and what came out onto the shore would look like neither a human nor an animal. They had been driving through dense forest for almost 3 hours. The weather was overcast but without rain, a perfect day for getting out of town. The trailer was old, American-made, with wooden interior panels but well kept. The father, Tom, constantly repaired it and considered it a family treasure. The mother, Lisa, was pouring juice for the kids, glancing at the GPS from time to time. But it behaved strangely. The signal kept dropping, the arrows spun, and the route kept recalculating on its own. The first to notice the water was the daughter, Mel. She was 10, attentive and calm. She simply said, "There, that's a lake," and pointed out the window. The trailer rolled out onto a small clearing. In front of them lay a perfectly round mirror. The water was so motionless it looked like black glass. No waves, no ripples, no smell. As if the water had been here not for years, but for minutes. Brick approached the shore first, sniffed, froze, stepped back, tail tucked. Mel frowned. She always trusted the dog more than people. The father turned off the engine. Strange place, but quiet. We'll have a snack and move on. The family unpacked their things. Everything was as usual. Sandwiches, a blanket, a thermos of tea. But the silence was too dense. The forest didn't rustle. Birds didn't sing. Even the wind seemed to avoid the lake. By evening, the air grew heavy and humid. The children got tired, and the parents decided to spend the night here. Brick refused to get inside the trailer. He lay by the door and stared at the lake as if standing guard. Inside, it was warm. Lisa was reading a comic book to her son. The girl was drawing. Tom was checking the generator and the lights. Everything looked normal, except for the strange feeling that someone was walking nearby. Around midnight, Mel woke up because Brick was scratching the door. Not pawing, but scratching, aggressively, insistently, as if trying to tell them, "Wake up." The girl quietly got up and walked to the window. It was dark outside. The moon hung low, but something was wrong. The grass, it seemed to be moving. Not like from the wind, but as if something underneath it was crawling. In waves, slowly, rhythmically. Mel called her father. Tom walked to the window, squinted, and saw the same thing. He turned on a flashlight and pointed the beam outside. The beam hit the water, and where the reflection should have been, there was none at all. The water swallowed the light like black velvet. And in that pitch darkness, something was moving. Vertical shadows, dozens of them, quiet, elongated, slow. Shapes, with no heads, with no faces. Tom quietly turned off the flashlight so they wouldn't give themselves away. Brick growled. Low, hollow, the way he only growled when he sensed mortal danger. "Are those drifters? Animals?" Lisa whispered. Tom didn't answer. He was closing the curtains one by one. No one slept that night. At dawn, a thick blanket of fog settled over the water. The silhouettes disappeared. The family decided to leave immediately. Tom started the engine. The trailer jerked, but didn't move, as if something was holding it from behind. He got out. Brick lunged forward, growling. The father walked around the vehicle and saw footprints, wet ones, hundreds of long, thin tracks, as if the water itself had been walking around the trailer all night. They were fresh. He jumped back inside and slammed the gas. The wheels spun. The trailer broke free, and they rolled down the forest road, trying to get away. But after a few minutes, the road started descending, downward, and the lower they went, the wetter the air became. And at some point, Mel quietly said, "We're driving toward the water." Tom hit the brakes. In front of him, the lake again. The same one, even though they had been driving in the opposite direction. The GPS showed a white screen. The phones had no signal. The family was trapped. And while the parents tried to figure out what was happening, Mel noticed movement near the shore. The same figure, tall, shapeless, half-transparent, as if it were made of water, and it lifted its head, or the place where its head should have been. The girl stepped back. Brick jumped toward the window, barking wildly. The figure moved forward slowly, step by step. But it wasn't the only one. Others began emerging from the fog, a dozen, and behind them, more, all moving the same way, rhythmically, as if following a command. Lisa shut the windows. Tom turned on the headlights. The beam hit the figure, and then they saw what finally broke them. The figure had no shadow, but it had a reflection in the trailer, not in the water, in the glass, the mirror-like surface of the window. Tom shifted into reverse. The wheels slipped, but the vehicle began to move. The silhouette sped up. They weren't running, they were gliding. The family broke onto a narrow road and drove away from the lake. But the farther they went, the stranger the area became. The road became damp. The sounds began to fade. And at one moment, a loud crunch came from under the trailer, as if they had driven over a roof. Tom stopped abruptly. He looked out the window and saw black fragments under the water. They were standing on the surface of the water. Not on a road, on water. The trailer stood on a thin film of surface tension, as if the water was holding it up. Beneath them, a city, enormous, sunken, buildings, streets, cars, all submerged, and hundreds of figures, the inhabitants of that city, standing on the bottom, staring upward. They had no faces, but they seemed to see the family. Brick howled, loud and desperate. Tom hit the gas. The trailer lunged forward. Water chased after them, tearing apart the surface. Figures beneath the water began reaching toward the trailer, like thousands of hands. The thin membrane of water they were driving on started cracking. The city sank deeper. The figures drew closer, and just when it seemed the vehicle would fall through, a patch of real land appeared ahead. The trailer burst onto the shore. The water behind collapsed, folding inward. The lake vanished, as suddenly as it had appeared. Silence returned. The family didn't say a word the entire way home. The GPS came back to life only 40 minutes later, when the forest was far behind them. None of them ever returned there. But sometimes, when the house gets too quiet at night, Mel wakes to Brick growling softly at the window, at the place where only darkness reflects back. Like water? Third story. I saw him again yesterday, standing across the street from my apartment, just staring up with that same sick smile. 3 years, 3 states away, and he is still following me. But let me tell you how this started, how my best friend vanished, and why I'll never stop looking over my shoulder. His name was Alex, and he disappeared on a Thursday night in June. We were supposed to meet at Miller S. Field, this abandoned baseball diamond behind Jefferson Elementary where my crew hung out. The school had been closed for years, and the field sat right at the edge of the woods. To get there, you had to walk through about 100 yards of dense forest. At night, those woods were pitch black. We had this unspoken rule: never go alone after dark. I broke that rule the night Alex disappeared. He texted around 10:30 saying he was heading there. I left first, figuring I'd have a smoke while I waited. When I pulled up, his red Honda wasn't there yet. I should have waited. Instead, I started down the path alone. The walk felt wrong that night. Branches seemed to reach for me, and I kept hearing sounds that made my heart pound. There was this old floodlight near the bleachers that cast everything in sickly amber glow. Beyond that circle of light, the darkness was absolute. I sat and waited. 10 minutes, 20, 30. I texted Alex 3 times, no response. The silence was getting to me. Miller, this field was never silent, but that night felt muted, like the world was holding its breath. After 40 minutes, I practically ran back to my car. That was the last time anyone saw Alex. By the next evening, his parents filed a missing person report. They found his car 3 days later, abandoned 5 miles away. Keys in the ignition, phone dead. No blood, no signs of struggle. The police dogs tracked his scent to the beginning of the trail, then lost it completely. The cops treated it like a runaway case, but Alex wouldn't leave like that. We'd been best friends since middle school. They told me, after 3 weeks, the official searches stopped. Except for me. The guilt was eating me alive. I started having nightmares. I'd hear Alex calling my name from the woods, but when I shine my light toward his voice, there'd be nothing. Just darkness and the feeling that something was watching me. 6 weeks later, I went back to Miller's field alone. Late at night, retracing our road. As I got close, I could see the amber glow through the trees. But there was movement. I crept forward until I could see the bleachers clearly. There were people there. 3 of them sat motionless at weird intervals, not just sitting quietly, frozen like statues. They weren't looking at phones, weren't talking, weren't even fidgeting, just staring straight ahead. Their faces were blank, expressionless. Their chests weren't even moving like they were breathing. Something about that stillness made my skin crawl. But the 4th person, that is what made my blood run cold. He was moving around the bleachers in this jerky, twitchy way that didn't look right. Too sharp, too precise, like a puppet. He spun suddenly, arms extending at unnatural angles, fingers splayed wide. Then he defreezed mid-motion for several seconds, completely still except for his head, which would tilt side to side like he was listening to something only he could hear. Then he skipped forward with these little hops, knees coming up too high. And he was making this sound, this low, tuneless humming that rose and fell in this arrhythmic pattern. It wasn't like humming a forgotten song. It was deliberate, structured in some way my brain couldn't parse. The pitch would drop suddenly, then climb back up in these wavering tones that set every nerve on edge. Like the sound fluorescent lights make when they re-dying, but organic, coming from a human throat. Even from 30 feet away, I could see he was smiling. Not a normal smile. This wide, fixed grin that looked painful. His lips were pulled back so far I could see teeth, gums, too much of the inside of his mouth. His eyes were too wide, unblinking even as he spun around. They reflected the amber light in a way that made them look almost metallic. I recognized him. Not clearly, but the way you recognize someone from a dream. I'd seen this man before. I stood there frozen, my legs numb, my breath shallow. My brain was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. It was like being in a nightmare where your body won to be you. He did pause sometimes right in front of one of the sitting figures, and he leaned down, bending at the waist with his back straight, his head tilting at that wrong angle, until his face was inches from theirs. I could see his mouth moving, lips forming words I couldn't hear. But the sitting figures never reacted, never blinked, never moved a single muscle. Then he jerked back up with this sudden motion that made me flinch, and he continue his dance. Sometimes he'd reach out and touch one of them, just a light brush across their shoulder or head. Even though they didn't react, I could feel the violation of it. The wrongness. These people weren't choosing to sit still. They couldn't move. Something had been done to them. That's when the real terror hit me. This wasn't random. This was intentional, a pattern, a ritual. And Alex might have been one of those motionless figures once. Might still be, somewhere. Then the dancing man stopped moving. He was facing away from me. And slowly, so slowly it made my stomach turn, he turned his head toward where I was hiding. Not his body, just his head, rotating like an owl. Yes. Even though I was standing in complete darkness, I knew he was looking directly at me. That broke the spell. I stumbled backward, caught my foot on a root. I kept moving backward, my eyes locked on that figure. He still hadn't moved his body, just stood there with his head twisted toward me, that fixed grin still plastered across his face. When I couldn't see the field anymore, I ran. I crashed through those woods, branches whipping my face. My lungs burned and my throat was raw from sobbing breaths. I could still hear that humming in my head, and I didn't know if it was real or if my brain had just recorded it so deeply that it had become part of me. At my car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in. That is when I started crying. Full body sobs, all the guilt I'd been carrying about Alex, all the fear and confusion and anger, it just came pouring out. I was supposed to be there for him. I was supposed to wait. Instead of leaving, I drove around to the back of the school lot. That's where I saw it. A car parked in the far corner, almost hidden. Even in dim light, I recognized it. Honda Civic, early 2000s. Red, the same aftermarket spoiler Alex had installed. My heart stopped. It was Alex's car. But that was impossible. The cops had found his car. It was in impound. As I rolled closer, my headlights swept over it. Same dent in the rear bumper from when he backed into a post. Same stupid bumper sticker. Even the same crack in the taillight. It was definitely his car, which meant either the cops had lied, or there were two of them, or something far worse. The car's headlights suddenly flashed on, high beams directly in my face. I couldn't see anything behind them. For what felt like an eternity, I just sat there, stunned and terrified. Then I slammed into reverse, tires squealing. I didn't look back until I was on the main road. I told my friends about it the next day. They believed me, but what were we supposed to report? Some people in a field? A car that looked like Alex's. I stopped going to Miller's field after that. My friends kept going for a while, but they always come back saying it felt wrong, like they were being watched. Eventually, they stopped too. The nightmares got worse. Now I see those three motionless figures, and when I get close enough, they all have Alex's face. Three identical versions of my best friend, sitting perfectly still, eyes staring at nothing. No matter how much I yell or shake them, they wouldn't respond. But the worst part was the dancing man. In the dreams, he'd stop and look at me, really look at me, and his smile would widen impossibly wide until it split his face. He'd reach out with those wrong-angled fingers and touch my shoulder. And I feel myself going still, my muscles locking up, my thoughts becoming quiet. I feel myself becoming one of them. I wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. Some nights I wake up and find myself sitting perfectly still on the edge of my bed, staring at my wall, with no memory of getting up. Those were the nights that scared me most. In late July, I was looking through our old high school yearbook. I was flipping through photos from junior year when I found him. A photo of the gymnasium during a basketball game. In the background, slightly out of focus near the equipment room door, was a man in a maintenance uniform holding a mop. Even out of focus, I recognized that face. It was the dancing man from Miller's field. The yearbook fell from my hands. This man had been in our school for years, walking the same hallways, invisible. How many times had Alex and I talked about meeting at Miller's field while this man pushed his mop past us, listening? We felt so smart, having our secret spot. But he'd known. Of course, he'd known. How long had he been watching us? I took the yearbook to the police. They ran a background check. 3 days later, they called back. They found employment records for a janitor, listed as Robert Hendricks. But when they tried to verify it, nothing connected. The social security number belonged to someone who died in 1987. The address was an empty lot. No driver's license, no prior history. The man had worked at our school for at least 4 years. But legally speaking, he didn't exist. I tried my own research, spent hours online, found nothing. This man had deliberately made himself invisible until he wanted to be seen. Near the end of August, me and a few guys went to Miller's field one last time. For closure, we thought. We sat on the bleachers, leaving Alex's seat empty. Nobody said much, but I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. Every time I glanced toward the woods, I felt eyes on me. The others felt it too. Jesse kept looking over his shoulder. Tom, his leg wouldn't stop bouncing. After 20 minutes, Marcus said, "We should go." That was the last time I went to Miller. This field. Senior year started. Alex, his empty desk everywhere. College applications. I didn't care where I went as long as it was far away. Then, on a Tuesday morning in September, everything changed. I stopped at a gas station on my way to school. I was standing in line, half asleep. I don't know what made me look up. Some instinct. I lifted my head, and he was there, fourth in line, 10 feet from me, the dancing man, Robert Hendricks, or whatever his real name was, standing perfectly still now, pretending to be normal. He was wearing regular clothes, jeans, gray sweatshirt. That made it worse. He could blend in anywhere. In the harsh lighting, I could see his face clearly. The skin was pale, almost waxy, pulled too tight. His eyes weren't quite the right color, not brown or blue or green, but something in between. Our eyes met. Time seemed to slow down. He smiled at me, not the manic grin from the field, but something subtler, knowing, like he'd been waiting for this moment. I dropped my coffee. He turned and walked out. I ran after him, shoving past customers. He was jogging toward a car idling near the exit, dark blue sedan. I ran as hard as I could. He jumped in and the car started moving. I kept running, trying to see the license plate. That is when I saw it. As the car peeled out, the sun hit the bumper. 3JXK729. Alex, his custom plate. The one he saved up for months to afford. I'd seen it thousands of times. But the car was wrong. Not a red Honda, but a dark blue sedan. They'd taken Alex's plate and mounted it on a completely different vehicle. Why keep his plate unless this was deliberate? A message proving they had him. I called the cops from that parking lot, hands shaking. They took my statement, but they never found the car. It didn't show up on any cameras, wasn't pulled over, just vanished. According to the DMV, Alex's plate was still registered to his Civic in the impound lot. That is when I understood. These people existed outside the normal system. That was 3 years ago. I am in college now, 3 states away. I haven't been back since Christmas freshman year, but I still dream about that amber light. Still see those 3 motionless figures in that dancing man. And yesterday, I saw him again, standing across the street from my apartment, staring up at my window with that same knowing smile. He was there for 30 seconds, then disappeared into the crowd. I don't know what he wants. I don't know why he is following me. But I know he's not done with me yet. And I know that somewhere, maybe in some dark place beyond an amber light, Alex might still be out there. Still sitting motionless, waiting. I'm sorry, Alex. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. But I am going to find out what happened. I am going to find out who these people are and what they did to you. One day, I'm going to make them answer. I promise you that, brother. 4th story. When Alex Hanley returned to his hometown of Brook Hollow in eastern Pennsylvania, everything seemed smaller than he remembered. The trees were thicker, the houses darker. Even the air, damp and sweet with rotting leaves, seemed to permeate everything with age and silence. He came for his father. Neighbors called the department, saying Mr. Hanley hadn't left the house for 2 weeks. The old man was a retired forester, a strange man, but not crazy. And when Alex parked in front of the peeling 2-story house on Mill Creek Road, he expected to see anything but what he actually found. The door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled of iron and something damp, like a basement after rain. In the kitchen, there was a broken cup, a telephone with no signal, and an old radio hissing on a single frequency. My father was gone, but all his things were there. There was a key on the table. Pinned to it was a note, "If you hear water, Dawn, to open the door." Alex, his first thought was that his father had completely lost his mind. But when he went upstairs to the attic, he found evidence that someone had recently slept there. A blanket, food in cans, empty bottles of water. On the wall, Someone had drawn a charcoal map of the creek that ran alongside the town. And next to the house marker was a sign, Mill Creek hasn't flowed since 1984. Then Alex remembered, in his childhood, this stream had indeed disappeared, supposedly due to a landslide. But now, standing by the window, he heard it, the thin, almost childish sound of running water. Behind the house, he stepped out into the backyard, his heart sinking. Where there had been a dry ditch for decades, a narrow stream now glistened. A soft, murmuring sound came from the darkness. But as he got closer, he realized it wasn't just water. It seemed to be whispering. He heard his name, Alex. He recoiled, knocked over an old bucket with his boot, and silence returned. For a moment, it seemed he conjured it up himself. But later that night, when he heard water again, this time right under the floor, Alex realized the house stood above something that shouldn't exist. He picked up the key from the table. On its metal surface, in the light of the flashlight, the letters appeared. Cellar, basement. When Alex descended into the basement, he understood why his father always locked that door. It smelled of musty earth, old paint, and something else, damp. As if there wasn't a wall beyond the walls, but the river itself. The flashlight shook in his hand. Dust hung in the air like fog. Dozens of glass jars filled with murky water stood on the concrete floor. Dates were written on the lids. The most recent one, 10.04.24, just a week ago. Each jar was labeled in my father's neat, firm handwriting. Night 1, Night 2, Night 12. There was a notebook on the table. Alex opened it, and his father's handwriting greeted him right from the first line. At first I heard only drops. Then, voices. They come when the water rises. They can see, but they feel footsteps. If the water reaches the floor, the house will go with them. The pages beyond were covered with illegible phrases and scratches. In one place, my father wrote, "Clearly in a panic, I buried the well. But it still breathes." Alex ran his hand across the floor. In the center of the room was an iron hatch. It definitely hadn't been there before. It bore the same symbol as the key. Cellar. He tried to lift the lid. Cold air, saturated with moisture, gushed out from underneath. And a sound, a whisper, the same one he heard outside. Alex. He recoiled, hitting his back against a shelf, and one of the jars fell and shattered. Water spilled across the floor, and a faint light emanated from somewhere in the crack between the slabs, as if something was moving beneath the floor, deep in the earth. He closed the hatch and ran upstairs. The night was starless. Alex didn't sleep. He sat on the floor by the window, listening and hearing again. Now the water whispered more than just his name. He is with us. Why did you come back? Home awaits. At dawn, he decided to leave. But when he stepped outside, the car's engine wouldn't start. The battery was removed. Someone was standing by the well at the edge of the yard, wearing an old jacket and a wide-brimmed hat. Alex shouted, "Hey, who are you?" The figure didn't move. And then he saw the person was standing knee-deep in water, even though it wasn't raining. He blinked, and the figure was gone. Only the well still gleamed with wet stone. Alex realized the water was approaching, not from underground, from all sides. The morning began with silence. Not just silence, sticky, lifeless. No birds, no wind, not even the old shutters creaked, as if everything around had frozen, listening. Alex stepped out onto the porch. The grass around the house was dark, as if soaked with moisture. Barefoot footprints lay on the steps, leading from the basement. He stood and stared at them until he realized the footprints were leading not into the house, but out. He slowly opened the basement door. The smell grew stronger, damp and something metallic, like blood. All the jars were gone. In their place stood old glass bottles, covered in mold, each with new labels. Now they were names. Michael, Rose, Alex. He traced his name with his finger. Beneath it lay fresh water. The bottle trembled slightly, as if someone was quietly knocking from within. Water dripped from the ceiling, not from a pipe, not from condensation. It was seeping straight from the wood. Each drop hit the floor, creating a quiet, rhythmic whisper. Alex covered his ears and still heard it. Dawn, to look down. Dawn, to open it. It is under the floor. He rushed upstairs, but the door wouldn't open. It was jammed. He yanked the handle, slammed his shoulder into it, and at that moment he heard a soft splash behind him, as if someone had emerged from the water. He turned around. A man stood on the stairs. In a wet shirt, his hair was stuck to his forehead, his eyes empty and shining. His father. "Dad?" He stared silently. Then his lips twitched slightly. "You shouldn't have come back. What did you do with the basement?" Alex breathed out. "What does this all mean?" It's not a basement," his father said quietly. It's a door." For a moment, the room froze. Then father stepped closer. Water splashed beneath his feet. It began to rise from the cracks between the boards. Cold, salty, alive. "Dad, stop!" Alex shouted, but he didn't move. He only said, "If the water has reached your feet, it is too late." The floor cracked. A viscous black liquid oozed out of the cracks, and from it, hands. Transparent, as if made of water. They reached for Alex. His feet grabbed and slid across his skin. He recoiled, grabbed a crowbar, and slammed it onto the floor. The wood cracked, and a fountain of water gushed from beneath the planks. A chill washed over him, and in that icy mass he saw that beneath the house was not earth. Beneath the house was a lake, and in its depths were shadows. Lots of them. He climbed up, gasping for air. The house was shaking. The walls were covered in beads of sweat. He rushed to the door, kicked it down, and rushed outside. But outside, everything had changed. The trees stood in water. The dirt road had become a river. No horizon, no sky, only gray fog and the endless reflection of the house in the water. Father followed him out. "You can still leave," he said. "What? There's nothing here." Father looked at him wearily. "The water remembers everyone who tried to leave, but sometimes it lets one go." He extended his hand. Alex took a step, and the water near the house trembled, as if breathing in. Faces flashed across the surface. Dozens, hundreds, and among them, his mother and brother, whom he hadn't seen in 10 years. He didn't remember screaming, only the chill that seeped into his bones. When he came to, he was standing on dry land. The house was gone. Only the expanse of water stretched before him. On the other side was fog and the silhouette of a man in a hat. He raised his hand, and raindrops began to fall from the sky, thick as mercury. The shore was dead. No sound, no wind, only drops. Heavy, thick, falling from the sky and disappearing, leaving no trace. Alex stood barefoot, not feeling the ground beneath his feet. The wind didn't touch his skin. The air felt thick, as if he were standing not on dry land, but at the very beginning of a dream. He looked at the water. The surface was mirror-like, and he wasn't reflected in that mirror. In place of his face was a house. Old, gray, with the same shutters, but half submerged. His father was on the porch. He stood and looked straight at him. "What is this?" Alex whispered. "Why am I here?" The answer came not as a voice, but as an echo in my head. They made it. All that was left is to remember. Remember what? He closed his eyes, and suddenly everything came flooding back. The sound of the crash, the smell of gasoline, the roar of the water. A year ago, that same night, he and his father were returning home from fishing. A bridge, rain, mud, a moment, and the car plunged into the water. And then, a splash. Darkness. He survived. They pulled him out, but his father was gone. But now, standing on this shore, Alex realized it wasn't the water that had dragged his father down. He had drowned, and his father remained. He took a step forward. The water trembled, and the surface began to rise, not like a wave, but as if something beneath it were rising to its feet. The shadow was approaching, and with every step, Alex felt something calling his name. Not a stranger, his voice, his own. "Alex," came a voice right behind him. He turned around. There he stood, wet, with gray eyes, no pupils. "I stayed there," the double said. "And you shouldn't have come back." The water began to envelop the shore, slowly rising to his knees, then to his waist. The double smiled and vanished, dissolving into the waves. Alex rushed forward without thinking. He dove. The darkness embraced him instantly. It was light underwater, a strange, greenish glow emanating from the depths. Below, a city, flooded, quiet, houses, trees, cars. And everywhere, people standing with their eyes open, and among them, his father. He looked up, and when Alex approached, he said quietly, "Home ISN to place, son. It's something we done. Let go of." He extended his hand, and Alex felt everything around him dissolve. Sounds, pain, even fear. Only water and breath. At the last moment, he saw a flicker of light above, as if someone had opened a door. A week later, fishermen found a boat overturned near the shore. Inside was a backpack, a phone, and an old map. On the map, instead of a cross marking a clearing, a lake was drawn. And underneath, barely legible, written in pencil, "Done, to look down." Fifth story. Everything around you seems safe until you start noticing the details. So, this happened in 2019. I was renting a place in a small town in Oregon, the kind of quiet town where you can hear dogs bark and garage doors slam at night. The house was old but cozy, creaky floors, the smell of dust and coffee in the mornings. I didn't look for solitude. I just wanted some calm after the divorce and changing jobs. Across the narrow yard was the neighbor's house, a man in his 50s, ordinary, a little awkward, but always polite. I never remembered his name, though he introduced himself, maybe Tom, maybe Ted. He almost always smiled, not a wide smile, more like a reminder to himself to look pleasant. At first, I didn't pay much attention. He was just part of the background. But after a couple of weeks, I noticed something. He never turned his lights off. Never. I could come home at 2 in the morning, 3, even at dawn, and his windows were still lit. A steady yellow light in the bedroom and the kitchen. I thought maybe he worked nights, or he was afraid of the dark. But every time I passed his house, he would be standing at the window. Sometimes smoking, sometimes just standing, not moving. It started to feel wrong. Not because he was there, people stand by windows all the time, but because it felt like he was waiting for me to look his way. One late September evening, I stayed late at work. It was around midnight when I walked up to my door. His light was on, as always. I looked up, and for the first time I saw him looking straight at me. Motionless, expressionless. I immediately looked away and went inside. From that night on, I kept the curtains closed. A few days later, I woke up with the feeling that someone was in the hall. Silence, only the hum of the fridge. I lay still for a minute, listening. Then I got up and peered through my bedroom window. And froze. It was raining outside. His window was glowing as usual. He was standing by the glass. But now he wasn't looking at the street. He was looking directly at my house. I backed away quietly, trying not to make a sound. And then a small thing happened. The kind of detail that fractures calm. In the morning, I found muddy footprints by my door. As if someone had stood there a long time. In the rain. Without moving. I told myself to ignore it. But that night I woke up again. This time from a sound. At first I thought wind. Then I realized it was a scrape under the window, like a finger tracing the glass. I lay there, not breathing, feeling cold run down my spine. Then footsteps. Slow, almost silent. They moved away, then stopped. The next day I asked the landlady about the neighbor. She hesitated. Then she said quietly, "You must be mistaken. No one has lived there for 3 years." I didn't know what to say to the landlady. Nobody has lived there for 3 years. Her words just hung in the air, and I didn't even ask anything in response. I just stood there, nodding like a fool. But when I got home, the neighbor, his light was still on. I even took a picture of it with my phone. Warm yellow light, a shadow by the window. He was standing there. He was definitely standing there. I sent the video to my friend Jake. He lives in Portland, is a techie, and always explains everything with logic. He wrote, "The problem is the old bulbs, dude. Maybe you're getting a reflection, or someone rented the house and the landlord doesn't, I wanted to believe it, but something inside me was gnawing. Something about this just didn't add up. The following week, I decided to go closer, just to check. The house was old, the paint peeling, the yard empty. I went to the window. Inside, nothing, no furniture, just dust and old curtains. But when I took a step to the side, the light turned on. Click, and I heard movement, like someone walking across the floor. I jumped back and ran back. By the time I reached my porch, the light had already gone out. From that evening on, I began recording everything that happened. Sounds, time, details. I didn't trust myself. which meant I needed to gather evidence. But the more I wrote, the less I understood. One night at 3:40, I heard muffled laughter. Quiet, as if someone was standing right under my window, laughing into their fist. I grabbed my phone, turned on recording, and looked out. No one. And in the morning, I noticed my door wasn't fully closed. The gap was just the width of a palm. I clearly remembered locking it with the latch. I called the police. They arrived 20 minutes later. 2 of them, polite and tired. They inspected the house, came out, and shrugged. It's no sign of forced entry. Maybe it's the wind, or maybe you forgot. I wanted to show them the house across the street, the one where nobody lives. But when we approached, there was no light or windows. The house looked abandoned. Boards, nails, peeling walls. The same one, but not the same. The policeman looked at me and said, "Sir, are you sure this is the house?" I didn't answer. I simply stared at my reflection in the black glass of the old window. And I saw someone standing behind me in the reflection. Since then, I haven't slept at night. Sometimes I think he is standing by the window again, this time in my house. And when the light hits at just the right angle, I see that same smile on the wall opposite. That same even smile, as if he were simply reminding himself to appear friendly. From then on, I stopped turning on the light at night. The less you can see, the safer. Or so I thought. I started checking my recordings, the ones I'd taken on my phone. One video shows a window across the street, night, a dim light. About 5 seconds later, a figure appears in the frame by the glass, standing and staring. Not moving. I paused, zoomed in, and froze. It was me, exactly me, same t-shirt, same cut on my neck from shaving. Only my face was a little different. As if I was still smiling. I assumed it was a glitch, a recording glitch, or some kind of timing issue. But 2 days later, I found a video on my phone I didn't remember recording. In it, I'm entering that same house across the street, in the dark, with a flashlight, and I'm saying something quietly, barely audible. I am back. You were waiting for me, weren't you? I woke up in a cold sweat. I checked the door. It was closed. The windows locked, but there was dirt on the hallway floor. Footprints from wet boots. Mine. I remember the boots were in the vestibule. Clean. Now they were covered in mud, as if I did just come in from outside. I tried to convince myself it was all a dream, but when I turned on the flashlight on my phone, a message appeared on the hallway mirror. Simple, subtle, like a finger brushing through dust. I see everything. You were in my house. I ran into the living room and turned on all the lights. And then I heard a sound, the creaking of the floor upstairs. Slowly, one board at a time. Someone was coming down. I stood there, holding my breath. A shadow fell on the wall. A step, another step, and I realized I could see my shadow, but I didn't move. He reached the last step and stopped. His face was exactly like mine, but his eyes were empty and black. I couldn't move. He smiled and said in my voice, "You finally awake." The light flickered. Everything went dark. I woke up in the afternoon. In my bed, there was a new folder on my phone. Quiet Fear, footage number 1. It contains a video of me looking into the camera and whispering. He is already inside. Now it's my turn to wait. After that night, everything became blurry. The days were the same. The hours were silent. I stopped understanding whether I was sleeping at all. Sometimes I do wake up and see new recordings on my phone, in my voice, but not me. I watched them. Then I found them again. The police came again. They said there was nothing on the cameras. No lights, no people, no house across the street. Just an empty street and me standing in the middle of the road. 5 nights in a row. I started doubting everything. Myself, my memories. Maybe I'm just tired? Maybe I'm the one who can sleep. The doctor at the hospital said I had acute sleep deprivation, possible hallucinations. He smiled like that neighbor. The same flat smile, as if forced onto his face. The last thing I remember is returning home after the examination. I closed the door, turned off the light, and just sat in the dark. I decided I want to look out the windows anymore. An hour passed, maybe 2. I heard a soft click. The phone screen turned on by itself. There, there's a camera on it, and in the window, this reflection is me, standing outside, looking inside. Since then, I lived with the curtains closed. I done to turn on the light. I try not to remember what I saw. But sometimes, when I walk through the house at night, I feel someone watching from the street, right at eye level. And I hear a quiet voice, similar to mine. Sleep. I'll keep watch.